You may have heard of the Red Cross, but do you know about the Red Crescent? The Red Crescent was created after the Russo-Turkish War, and while many Muslim-majority countries have the Red Crescent instead of the Red Cross, the Soviet Union was one of the few nations to incorporate the Red Crescent from the very beginning due to its large Muslim population. So, in case you don't know, the Red Cross and Crescent is a humanitarian movement made up of volunteers who aid mostly in the medical sense during wartime, conflict, or natural disasters. The Red Cross initially was founded by Jean-Henri Dunant in the mid-19th century due to the massive death toll after the Austro-Surgenian War. He wanted to create something to help people no matter what side they were on. Now, the Red Crescent was organized by the Ottoman government in 1865, following the Turco-Russian and Crimean Wars. It has since become one of the most important charitable organizations in the Muslim world. In 1918, Lenin created a committee to decide what the Red Cross will be doing internationally and domestically within the Soviet Union. By 1923, the committee had decided to conjoin the Red Cross and the Red Crescent representing the nearly 20% Muslim population of the Soviet Union and their needs, with 11 republics having their own Red Cross societies and 4 republics having Red Crescent societies, all working with each other. The official Soviet structure of the Red Cross and Crescent is quite interesting because it was made up of millions of volunteer nurses, health station professionals, and volunteer public health inspectors, all of whom help medical workers in the prevention of infectious diseases, in the overseeing of public health services and amenities in cities and villages, in improving working conditions and living conditions, and in the provision of emergency and first aid at scenes of incidences. Private nurses also worked for the Society's committees to make home visits to those who've become disabled as a result of war injuries or injuries suffered at work who have no one else to care for them. The Soviet Union really pushed volunteering for the Red Cross and Crescent, and in donating money to them, they even had their own journal and magazine. In the United States, we don't often hear about the Red Crescent, though it does exist, and while our Muslim population is more about 1%, it would certainly be nice to have that sort of representation and acknowledgement of that community within the country. In general, people often mischaracterize the Soviet Union and its tolerance for religion, especially with such a large population of historically Muslim people. What that looked like, what that meant, who they are, and how intermixed they are throughout the entire Soviet Union as jobs became more open to all people and travel became more frequent. The symbolism for the Red Cross and the Red Crescent is always put together, and when we look at advertisements and propaganda posters throughout Soviet history from the very beginning, you see this depiction. Sometimes you even see a very clearly represented Muslim woman in these sorts of posters as well. And while these posters mostly encourage people to volunteer, that representation really means a lot. So here are some of my favorite propaganda posters of the Red Cross and Red Crescent featuring the symbolism of both the cross and the crescent. Firstly, we have these 3 girls, so you have some representation there. There's this one with a child who's very, very happy to fly that flag of both the cross and crescent. This is an interesting photo featuring multiracial kids. It's interesting. This one is a pretty standard one. After wartime, just Red Cross or Red Crescent nurses helping the injured and sick. This is probably the most famous poster and the most common one you'll see about the Red Cross and Crescent. There were also lots of stamps that featured the cross and crescent, and those who donated blood or volunteered were often gifted medals and pins. For those of you that grew up within Russia, it might not be a shock at all. You always knew of the Red Crescent's existence because it is just everywhere that the Red Cross is. Myself, growing up in the United States, I didn't know that the Red Crescent Society even existed until I began studying the history of World War II from the Eastern Front, and I came across imagery of the crescent next to the cross, and that was my first exposure. I was probably 17. That's kind of late in life to know that these sorts of things exist, don't you think? But it's also very important in how we understand the world and history and the people within these locations. The Soviet Union is often talked about as though it's some sort of monolith and as if there is extreme forms of religious oppression. No thanks to the massive spreading of anti-religious propaganda without proper historical context. But having this sort of context and understanding of Muslims actively being included into things by the government from the very beginning, of course, in a 70-year period, things change, bad decisions happen, whatever. But what I'm talking about is in general. The Muslim community was always recognized in advertisements and posters. Things were localized, and in very important aspects like public health and volunteering for bettering society and helping in natural disasters and war, of course they're going to include all people of the society. And I think the reason why many of us don't assume this is a part of Soviet culture and history is because we like to copy and paste our own Western ideals. And in the Western world, we often forget about the minorities in our community, even the significant ones. Of course, Muslims, nearly 20%, that's a huge minority of the population. But comparatively, how we treat Muslims in the United States, yeah, they got us beat there. I mean, you only really see someone in hijab if it's for them talking about their religion or for a company to pretend to be woke or something, and, you know, someone like me actually going into their store, you never really know what's going to happen. And I suppose some can look at this representation and be like, oh, it's performative. It's kind of hard to be purely performative when, again, they make up a large percentage of the population. But I hope you all can look at advertisements and pictures like this and change maybe a little bit of your perception of what the Soviet Union looked like, what their propaganda also looked like. I think a big issue in the Western English-speaking world is even when we are shown Soviet propaganda, we're only shown certain kinds, and it doesn't give you the whole picture or scope or even the localization, how many are in different languages, who they all include, different color palettes and style. We really only are introduced to a very small amount of them. And so hopefully this can open your eyes and broaden your perspective a little bit about what the diversity, the religious diversity, the ethnic diversity, the multinationalism that was celebrated within the Soviet Union, and what that looked like and what that scope was. Of course, largest country on earth. It's going to be more than just a bunch of East Slavs, but we don't always think about that. What about you? Did you know about the Red Crescent before this? Did you know about these posters? Let me know down below. My name is Lady Izdihar. I'm a historian on Eastern Europe and Russia. Thank you for joining me, and you can find me on all of these places, and hopefully I'll get my permanently banned TikTok back soon. That sucks that it's gone. And if you are one of the lucky few in this world that is burning and falling apart that has some extra cash, join my Patreon and support me there. Be inspired by history. Thank you.